We heard from Mitch McConnell this afternoon. We can expect them to be off to the races, in effect, beginning for real next Tuesday when this thing gets going, this trial. But right now, what was most striking to a lot of folks was McConnell acknowledging that there was little to no sentiment in favor of an outright dismissal, which gets to this point of this Republican reckoning where McConnell's up against some members of his own party who say they want to see some fairness here.
Yeah, listen, I think McConnell's been consistent throughout this entire thing on one point, which is the Senate has a responsibility to take this to trial. He believes it's good for the institution, according to him. It's good for the president if the president has done nothing wrong, which McConnell believes is the case. And it's good for senators to have to go through the process. Now, the witness question is really the only lingering question here. And you have people ranging from, as you had on the graphic, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, Lamar Alexander, all saying that they want to listen to the trial. They want to listen to the proceedings and then make a judgment on whether there should be witnesses, whether they feel there are holes in the case. But remember, Peter, I mean, we're talking about that vote on witnesses is going to be weeks away. You're going to have, most likely, if this process mirrors the 1999 Clinton process, you're going to have 24 hours for the sides to make their case. You have a period in which the senators can question the two sides. So, I mean, we're really talking about a couple weeks away, but still, this is the critical question. Will any witness in this trial be able to get 51 votes? And that's a big lingering question, which frankly, at this point, we cannot answer. We do not know what the mood and mind share of those senators that we mentioned and many more senators will be after this extended period of a trial of the President of the United States.
Now, we're going to walk through what McConnell said today about the possibility of witnesses, were there to be witnesses who he would want to call. But, Heidi, I want to get to some of your reporting right now, which is about some of those vulnerable Republicans who really face a dilemma in this moment. Do you go all in with the president? Or if you're vulnerable, do you need to sort of protect yourself against some independents who say they want to see you give this a real fair shot?
Right, Peter, I'm not sure that the vulnerable Republicans are going to be the big group of defectors here on witnesses, because I've looked at what some of these vulnerable Republicans have said. For instance, Thom Tillis, all the way back in October, saying that he was firmly against this, and now just last week saying he also doesn't want witnesses. These guys still can be primaried. They're going to be going through this trial at a time when that primary window is still open. So it's no surprise then that we look to, with the exception of Susan Collins, senators like Senator Lamar Alexander, senators like Mitt Romney, who, by the way, is the only one who's on the record saying he wants Bolton. The other three are just saying we're not ruling out witnesses. So to Jake's point, we are weeks away from knowing whether at the end of the case that is made by both sides, by the president and by the House managers, whether there's going to be a vote on witnesses as well as the specific witnesses that the House managers want. And then part two, that the president isn't going to block them. You can be sure that if he's going to try and block John Bolton, that he's going to try and block Mick Mulvaney as well and Mr. Blair as well. So we are a long ways from actually hearing from these witnesses in a Senate trial.
So, Charlie, as we bring up the name John Bolton, of course, the former national security advisor to the president, who said if subpoenaed, he would testify before the Senate. Of course, he came around during that gap of time when Nancy Pelosi was waiting. So Democrats pounce on that, in effect, as a win here. But look at what Americans are saying. This is from a Quinnipiac poll that shows strong support for Bolton testifying. It says that 66% of all voters say they would like to see Bolton testify. And remarkably, perhaps 39%, nearly 4 in 10 Republicans say they would like to see Bolton testify as well. Is John Bolton really the pressure point when it comes to witnesses here?
Well, it certainly could be. And that Quinnipiac poll is pretty decisive, given the fact that almost everything else in this country is 50-50, that you would have 66% of Americans saying that they want to hear him testify. And obviously, here is somebody who has firsthand information. Here is somebody who can testify about his conversations with the president, which, of course, Republicans have been complaining hasn't been there. But again, I'm something of a Bolton skeptic, because, number one, we don't know how aggressively, as Heidi mentioned, the president is going to exert executive privilege. And secondly, it's an open question what he would actually say. It's not necessarily in John Bolton's interest to become the John Dean of the Trump administration if he wants to have any sort of a future in Republican politics. But there's no question about it that this was one of the benefits that I think that Democrats got out of the delay, the focus on the question of witnesses, and the fact now that Mitch McConnell does not get to totally drive the bus. The fact that there are 4 senators who are willing to say, OK, we're not going to allow you to make this into a witnessless sham is a significant development, because it was not clear before she delayed that the Republicans would simply dismiss this, or that Mitch McConnell would, in fact, execute his plan to have no witnesses, no evidence whatsoever.
And Matt, we heard from the president last week, speaking to Laura Ingraham on Fox News, basically saying that he didn't think that Bolton should testify, not so much for his own presidency, but for the sake of future presidents, to protect the institution of the executive branch here. If Bolton is subpoenaed, and he says he wants to do it, is there anything the White House can do to stop him?
First of all, it's always good that the president's thinking of the interests of other people, not himself. I'm sure we all believe that. No, really, it's up to John Bolton in that case. If a witness wants to come forward and testify, the White House cannot block them from testifying by asserting executive privilege. And you basically saw that play out in the House already, where a number of administration witnesses came forward. The White House tried to block their testimony, urged them not to testify because of certain privileges. Those witnesses came forward, and the White House didn't go to court to try to block them because I think they knew they could lose. That said, I'm with Charlie. I've always been somewhat skeptical of what John Bolton was up to, what kind of game he was playing. It is possible that he could come testify and the White House would claim privileges over certain aspects of his testimony, and he would defer to the White House then, which would then kick it into the courts. On top of that, Bolton is one of only 4 witnesses that Schumer wants to get access to. The other 3 witnesses, Mick Mulvaney and 2 others that Heidi mentioned, have shown no indication that they are willing to buck the White House. So we may really be talking about a conversation of only one witness. Even if the Senate votes to subpoena others, the White House may be able to drag that out in court.
Some Democrats view bringing in Bolton very much as a risky move. They haven't had a chance to depose him. Democratic staff have not been able to do sort of the formal closed-door grillings that they do with the other witnesses. They don't know what he's going to say. They don't know what he knows. And remember, even though Bolton in some ways has publicly broken with the administration, at his core, he's a true believer in executive authority and an executive privilege. And I think it's unlikely that he would get on the witness stand and talk about conversations he had with the president that are totally rock solid, arguably protected by an executive privilege claim. In addition to that, of course, his background also shows that he's not someone who's necessarily going to be interested in playing ball with Democrats or helping this party that, in his view,
he was praising the White House for its handling of Iran just a couple of days ago.
For Democrats to put a lot of their political eggs in the John Bolton basket does not come without risk.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.